Welcome to the Sports Ethicist Show, coming to you from the basement of Burpee on the campus of Rockford College in Sportstown, USA, Rockford, Illinois. I am Sean Klein, the sports ethicist and philosophy professor at Rockford College. The Sports Ethicist Show discusses the many ethical and philosophical issues that arise in and around sport. You can read the Sports Ethicist blog at sportsethicist.com, where you can also download podcasts of previous shows, subscribe to the podcast, or find links to related information. The Sports Ethicist is also on Facebook and Twitter. Our email is sportsethicist@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you. Now, whatever you call it, association football, soccer, futbol, it is by most measures, revenues, fans, TV ratings, the most popular sport in the world. Yet in the U.S., it's a distant fifth in terms of revenue behind the National Football League, baseball, basketball, and hockey. But since the U.S. hosted the World Cup in 1994, there has been a push to increase the popularity of soccer in the U.S. In the last few years, average match attendance has increased, and by that measure, the MLS, the Major League Soccer, might be the third biggest sport in the States. But will soccer ever become as popular here as it is in Europe and the rest of the world? Joining me to discuss this and other related topics is Bill Gahan, an English professor at Rockford College. Welcome to the show, Bill.
Thanks. Hi.
Hey, so now you grew up in Spain and are a Real Madrid fan, correct?
Correct.
All right. Now, maybe you could help us get a sense of just how popular soccer is in Europe. What is it like to be a soccer fan growing up in Europe? I mean, are there other sports that are sort of on the radar at all, or is it just soccer and then everything else is sort of second best?
I think soccer and basketball are the most popular sports in Spain. Baloncesto y futbol.
Yeah.
But, the Spanish basketball team is
very good.
Is excellent.
Yeah.
And there's a long tradition of basketball in Spain. I mean, I grew up watching Real Madrid basketball team.
Okay.
As well as the soccer team. Yeah. Soccer is more popular than basketball, but basketball is very, very popular in Spain. And it has been since I was a little kid.
So it's been a while then.
Yeah, it's been a while. 1966.
Right. And I mean, obviously you're from Spain. You're not from all over Europe. Is that a similar pattern, though, in Europe and in England? I mean, I know in Israel, I know basketball is also very popular and soccer, too.
Well, judging by the teams we play, yeah. I mean, we play the French, the Italians, the Germans. Mm-hmm. The Russians have always had a strong basketball team. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I think basketball is extremely popular in Europe. I don't know about England, though. I don't think that
I don't hear
it's a very popular sport in England at all, but I might be wrong about that. That's an impression. Yeah, no, I
share that impression. I think you have things like cricket and rugby that I think become more the quote unquote second sports in England. Mm-hmm. and the British Isles.
Mm-hmm. Another sport that's popular in Spain that you'd never hear about here is balonmano, handball.
Handball.
Yeah,
okay.
It's very popular. I mean, that's on TV and.
Now that's sort of racquetball but you play with your hand, right? Or
it's like soccer, but you play with your hands.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, that I'm not familiar with. Because handball here, like if you go over to the Y, you can play handball, but it's basically racquetball, but you play with a glove on your hand.
No. It's like soccer.
Okay.
It's indoors, and you pass the ball around,
and
you're allowed 2 steps or something like that, and then you try to make goals by throwing the ball in the goal.
Oh, okay. That's interesting. I've never heard of that.
Balonmano.
Oh. And then there's bullfighting. Is that perceived, one, as a sport, and two, is it popular, or is it more of like a cultural tradition that's part?
Bullfighting is not a sport.
Okay.
It's more akin to a drama.
Okay.
It's its own thing. It's La Fiesta Nacional is what it's called.
Mm-hmm.
It's violence that's subjected and submitted to protocol.
Okay.
And it's 15 minutes exactly. And if it doesn't end in 15 minutes, then it's to the detriment of the bullfighter.
Okay.
And so it's like a three-act tragedy.
Oh, okay.
And that's how it's perceived, as a tragedy. Just like with drama, you know that tragedy ends with the death of the protagonist. So the protagonist is the bull.
Okay.
And the bull is personified in ways that it's talked about as noble or not noble or this or not, in the same way that a protagonist of a traditional tragedy would be talked about as having either a tragic flaw or something like that. That's the way the bull is talked about by those who know about bullfighting.
Oh, okay.
And so each part of that act is part of that demise of the bull.
Oh. Now,
so that's not a sport at all. It's more of a tragedy.
Okay. No, I mean, that makes some sense given just the very little that I know about it. But when you say it's not a sport, I mean, and this isn't what I brought you on to talk about, but I'm something that you're really interested. Either. Yeah, just but really interested in it.
Yeah.
Are there regular sort of performances or tournaments or something like that go on throughout the year, or is it really just sort of one?
In Spain, it's in the winter, and it's in the fall and in the spring. In the summer, it's in South America and in Mexico. So many of the Spanish bullfighters, they go to Mexico and South America for the summer.
Okay, but there's not like there's just one event. There's a couple of events in a given season.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
It's on Sundays.
Okay.
Usually
every Sunday for a certain period of time.
Exactly at 5:00 in the afternoon.
Huh. Interesting. But now,
I mean, there's different festivals,
sure.
like the San Fermín festival, which will have corridas or encierros. The corridas are actually the bullfights themselves. The encierros are the lockups when the populace takes the bulls from their enclosure to the bull ring.
Okay.
By running them in.
That's the so-called running of the bulls, or
yes.
Yeah.
There are many of those. Okay. Many small towns have those, but the one in the San Fermín one in Pamplona is famous. One. It's not. I mean, it's big now, but it's known outside of Spain because of Hemingway.
Oh, okay. That's where.
But many. I mean, there's a San Sebastián de los Reyes, which is near our house in Madrid. That little town. It's outside of Madrid on Highway M30. They have one that's just as large, but tourists don't go to it. You know, it's just more for that village.
That village, but it's not perceived as sort of in the same class as soccer or basketball. It's really something quite different in the mind.
It's quite different. Okay. It's not a sport.
Interesting.
I mean, you're not competing. I mean, the end is already known.
Right. Yeah, the bull dies.
The bull dies.
Yeah.
I mean, there are exceptions.
Mm-hmm.
But those are rare.
That's fascinating. We'll have to have you on some other time just to talk about bullfighting.
I probably know more about bullfighting than I do about soccer, although I like soccer much more.
Okay. So soccer, basketball, those are the real sports. Not real sports, but the most popular sports. Now, how much more popular do you think soccer is than basketball? Do you think it's like almost twice as popular, or something less than that, or even more?
I don't know. I know that they're both pretty darn popular.
Yeah.
But soccer's more popular. I don't know how much more.
Okay. Yeah. But it's definitely more popular. Just trying to quantify that is hard.
You know, something I've noticed about, growing up in Spain, when the Olympics come on, and this was in a time before cable had all the hundreds of channels.
Right, where you get to watch everything.
Well, actually, you could watch everything when I was growing up in Spain. They would, all throughout the whole day, they'd show you all of the Olympics. Okay. Even the sports that we would assume nobody cares about, they would show them. They would show them all day and all night. They would just be on TV. And that was something that surprised me when we were in Los Angeles. When were the Olympics in Los Angeles? A long time ago.
84?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That only a few events were shown.
Yeah.
And a lot of packaged little shows about, little stories about the individual.
The human interest angle.
The human interest stuff.
Right. And then everything is taped.
It drove us crazy because we were in the States for the Olympics that were in Los Angeles, yet we couldn't wait to get back to Spain to watch the Olympics on TV.
Yeah, the NBC, I don't know if NBC was the one who's still doing it in
but now
84.
It's better, though, right?
They've gotten better.
You have more choice.
But it really only very recently, and they really resisted the internet and making use of the internet as a distribution channel, and because they were afraid it was going to take away from their primetime numbers, and they experimented in the last one, and I think it showed quite the reverse, that by allowing people to watch things as they unfolded live on the internet, they still would watch the prime time to see the package deal of it.
Yeah.
And so that's I think they learned a good lesson there, that the more the more they get it out there, the more people are going to be interested in it, the more they're going to be engaged in it and going to want to watch more of it.
Yeah, I remember my brother, when Bob Costas said, the Olympics isn't about sports. It's about stories. He got up and he was so mad. He said, no, it's not. It's
bullshit. It's about sports. Even the stories. It might be about the stories, but those are stories about sports. Yeah, no, that's true. I guess then just kind of shift the focus back to the U.S. and soccer. One of the things in trying to look up some information about this, one of the interesting, I guess, factoids or whatever that I came across was that in the 1920s, the American Football League or American Soccer League, whatever, I forget what the precise sort of name was, but the league that managed the major soccer teams in the U.S., they got into trouble with FIFA and because they were drawing talent from Europe. And so that in a way, in the 20s, soccer was almost as popular as baseball. And as big revenue as well, and then was also drawing in the best talent in the world. And that's not the case today. It is the case in almost all the other, in the major sports if you want to be, basketball is a good example where the Europeans play a lot of basketball. They love basketball. It's very popular there. But if you're the best basketball player, you got to be in the NBA, and same with hockey to a large extent, NHL and so on. Soccer, that's not the case by any stretch, and Major League Soccer, though it's certainly improved, doesn't compare at all to La Liga or to EPL or to any of the other European or other international leagues. But so one question that I wanted to ask you is: do you think at some point soccer will ever be as popular here as it is in Europe?
I don't know. You see youth soccer, and isn't it one of the most popular sports for kids?
Yeah, I think it's only second behind, Little League Baseball in terms of people that play it. I think also, one statistic I saw was just sort of like someone in a household playing a sport. So it might be a kid, so not necessarily youth soccer, but someone playing soccer could be an adult in an adult league and so on. But that baseball and then soccer in terms of the number of people playing.
So something seems to be happening between that and then making money from it on television, right?
Right. Yeah.
So I don't know. I'm not an expert on this, but it just seems to me that here are some of the differences between, say, basketball and soccer for a televised audience. Mm-hmm. With soccer, you can't stop. You can't stop to take a break in order to show commercials, in order to have color commentary, in order for the network to have its message out there, unless you put it on the jerseys, which they already do.
Right.
Or you put it on this, that's what they do in Europe. You put all the commercials on the jerseys
and on the side of the field. On the side of the walls along the pitch, there's all the advertising along the walls that changes, and some of it is clearly digital and being superimposed by the networks. But.
Right. So that's a big difference, and I don't know to what extent that is controlling the decisions about whether to put or to make games more available, because that's the piece that kind of, that cuts it off from becoming more and more popular and more of a revenue-producing event. Right,
because if the best athletes in the U.S., and they're growing up, and so many of them are playing soccer, baseball, other stuff, they end up, though, by the time they're in college, they're playing probably either football or basketball, maybe baseball. But the best athletes here are going into those two sports because those are the sports where you can have the biggest payoff as a professional career. Mm-hmm. And in Major League Soccer, not as much of a perceived payoff, although I think that's beginning to change as as Major League Soccer is now, I don't know how old it is, but it's been going since the 90s, so it's got at least a good decade underneath it. It's doing well, it's growing, its revenue is good in terms of its growth. It still pales in comparison to the other sports and pales in comparison to La Liga and EPL. Mm-hmm. I don't think I think they haven't even broken the $500 million mark. Mm-hmm. but it's getting bigger. And then you have scores of the top American soccer players playing in England, in Germany, and Denmark, and Italy, and so on. Although I did look at the list, I didn't see any in Spain. So I don't know what that's about. Why don't you guys let Americans play with you?
Right now, I mean, I think 10 years ago they would have, but right now, Spain is doing really well in training its players. I mean, there are a lot of Spaniards playing for Spain.
Okay.
I mean, for Spanish teams. Of course, there's South Americans, there's French, there's Germans. I don't know.
Yeah.
How many Americans are playing in Europe?
I don't know the total number. It was a pretty long list, but it looked like there's at least 20 or so that are playing in England, and then and then at least 20 or so that are playing sort of in Germany and the Netherlands. And then the rest are sort of scattershot through the rest of the world. But I mean, there's easily a couple hundred that are playing internationally. But in terms of the top leagues, which I guess would be, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, 'cause you're more an expert on this than I am. La Liga, EPL, the French league, the German league, Italian league with that Series A, and then the German league is...
Well, this is just Europe.
You're right.
Yeah.
And the German league is how do you say that?
Bundesliga.
Those are the biggest in Europe, and I think that's, in terms of revenue, I think that they're bigger than what's going on in the South American leagues, which would be the other big market, I would assume. I mean, the Asian market's probably pretty big too, but I don't know anything about that. Right. So in terms of those leagues, I mean, I know that there's a number of Americans playing in France and in Italy, a number in Germany. I think the biggest chunk is in England, which makes sense just for probably cultural reasons. And so, I mean, with that, I think we were seeing a lot more, at least a professional path that if an up and coming athlete who could choose between going pro in any number of sports, as they begin to see a professional path for soccer, they might choose that, and then that just becomes a positive feedback loop, because you get a couple more choose that, oh well, now it's more popular, and oh, there's more money, there's more revenue, oh, there's more people begin to choose it.
Yeah, I didn't know there were that many Americans, as you said, playing in Europe, because if that's going to continue, then maybe there is hope for. I mean, because that's what will probably make people start to care. Is here's our countryman, and he's playing for, Manchester City or whatever, and that will get even more interest for people to start watching it. And then if the television networks will start picking up some of these games in whatever way they think they need to make it interesting, by saying, I don't know.
Yeah, it's Landon Donovan versus
Idaho,
Clint
and
Dempsey.
He's playing for Manchester City, and something like that.
The list that I saw doesn't indicate, it indicates which city they're playing for, or which club they're playing for, rather. But I don't know how many of those are the top tier, because it listed by nation, not necessarily by playing in which league. So I think you'd have to look a little closer at and then they might be on the team. How many of them are playing? I mean, like you have like Clint Dempsey, what's his name? Dempsey, Clint Dempsey, who and Tim Howard and Landon Donovan, who do get significant play time. I don't know how much play time a lot of those other Americans get, but I think that is part of the process. Is getting more and more of that. I'm not so sure that Americans are going to care that much about Americans playing for Man United or Liverpool or whatever, even if they do well over there. I think they're not going to really start to care until those guys are playing for the MLS in their own backyard. And then
they can have tournaments against teams that are already established, and if they start to have success against them, that could start to galvanize people.
I sent you that link about a couple of weeks ago about an actual tournament, not a friendly, not just an exhibition game, but actual tournament. I forget which teams were involved, but significant. I think Chelsea and Madrid was on that list. Several teams have committed to be a part of this. I don't know what they're calling it. Tournament for a cup.
Exhibition tournament to make some money.
Well, that's probably from the perspective of the European leagues, but it's not an exhibition. I guess in a way it's an exhibition because it's not part of their particular league structure, but it's not just a friendly. Okay. So it's not just a standalone exhibition game. It's part of a tournament, and so those games will mean something. It certainly means something, I think, from the American teams that are going to be participating, and.
I'd go see those.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. That's why I sent it to you. See if we can try to make sure that they can go. But and I think that was preceded by a number of the standalone friendlies of Chelsea and Manchester United touring the U.S. and playing these different exhibition games, drumming up support, and the MLS has responded and done well. I mean, they haven't. I think Chelsea comes over and plays. Or is it? I don't know quite how that works. If whether the winner of the EPL comes over and they play the MLS All Stars or something like that.
So it's kind of a Champions League.
A little bit. Well, I think the idea of this new tournament is to kind of make it a kind of Champions League, but here, and based in the U.S. and have those teams come and play here against us. But in the last couple of years, Manchester United, Chelsea have come over and played the MLS All Stars as part of like the All Star game instead of just having. I guess
there's already an American Champions League too, right? The CONCACAF, champions. Yeah. But this would be even more international, drawing from the best from all regions.
Right. Yeah,
are there South American teams too? And
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know. It looked like it was primarily European teams, and I think the idea is to try to increase the attention about that to help grow the sport. And I think it will help. I mean, the question, will it ever be as popular as in Europe, I think is in a way kind of a silly question, right? Because it won't. I mean, there's soccer, there's basketball, there's other sports, certainly if you're in, like Switzerland, Alpine downhill, Austria, downhill skiing, leads their version of ESPN, right? It's going to be like the downhill skiing tournaments. I've talked to some people from Austria, and then they get into soccer and other stuff, right? So I mean, there's going to be pockets of other popular sports, but I think in Europe, soccer and the rest of the world, soccer is so much more popular than anything else that to have the Americans or U.S. have it as popular as that seems unrealistic. I think partly the question is, where's it going to fit in terms of relation to the other U.S. major sports? In terms of is it going to be as popular as the NFL? Is it going to be popular as baseball? Is it going to be as popular as hockey or basketball here? And that I think is a more realistic kind of analysis.
Well, I think there's so many different ways to look at this, but one thing is if you're going to talk about popularity, what is the reason for which a sport becomes popular and becomes part of the collective idea of what that sport means for that country? And I don't think the United States has established a love for the sport in relationship to its own identity. And I think that's something that needs to happen if it's going to become more popular. It's not just they can't stop for commercials, they can't stop for this, they can't stop for that. But I think that's a big part of it in terms of revenue. For example, in Spain, when you talk about soccer, you can talk about all kinds of historical moments. In Spain has been, as the national team, has been an underdog for a long time. Not in the sense that it wasn't capable, but it was an underachiever, that it always went out in quarterfinals. There's always a lot of talk about, how they always have all this expectation and then they come plummeting down in the big events. And now that's changed. And so there's this story, there's this trajectory that galvanizes people, that you can go back to a history and talk about it in relationship to the nation that you can't do with soccer in the United States.
Right.
And so that would need to start to build on itself in some way. There needs to be a narrative that ties to what people perceive as American tradition that baseball certainly has and that football has garnered since the 60s, right? Or since
and baseball obviously goes back to, close to the Civil War and has been a major professional sport since the turn of the century.
Well, what I meant by the 50s and 60s in football isn't of course how far it goes back. It goes back further than that. But in terms of when it's becoming the big sport that it is.
Right. That's its roots of becoming a major sport are in the 50s and 60s. I mean, it'd been around for a lot longer than that. My point, baseball goes back further as having those major points, and then football. The 50s or 60s, as it really becomes much more professional, I guess, just at a higher level of professionalism. Basketball probably really doesn't do that until probably until the 70s and 80s in a lot of ways. I mean, it has been around, but it's still to some degree, even now, kind of a I don't want to, how do I put this? Like, I don't want to say regional, because it's not just in one region of the U.S., but it is sort of more pocketed. So it's popular. It might be popular, in the Northeast, and then in the Chicago area or something like that. But it's not as national, I think, as baseball or football, and hockey certainly is regional. And that's why I do think, if soccer was going to become more of a major sport, overcoming some of the hurdles that you've mentioned, I think it's not going to challenge football, at least not in the next foreseeable future, the next 10 years. Nothing is going to challenge American football short of itself. Right? I think that's the only thing that's going to get in its way, is if some of the concussion stuff that's going on in football, that might undermine some stuff. But in terms of that, I don't think anything's going to come close to football. Baseball seems to have really just kind of plateaued in the last 30 years, but has stayed there. And I think that's pretty much its niche, and it's going to stay there. But I do think soccer can threaten in a way and take over the spots from hockey and basketball, and can move into that sort of third position. In part because I think both hockey and basketball are somewhat regional. And hockey has some of the issues that you talk about in terms of the commercials. Basketball doesn't, because it has those quarters. And hockey overcomes that with, they have the two long intermissions, and so there's time there to do. And there are other natural stops in the game. But I view that much more as a technical problem that can be solved by some creative people in Madison Avenue or something like that, coming up with some ways to sell the sport, commercialize the sport in a way on the sides to get the advertising there, to get those advertising dollars there. And I mean, they do that obviously to some degree in Europe. I mean, La Liga,
they make a lot of money.
EPL. Now these are rough estimates comparing from the Euro. I think it's about $3.3 billion. The EPL, and La Liga is about $2.25 billion. Those are comparable numbers to NBA and NHL in the U.S. Yeah. So and MLS, as I said, is below $500 million. But are those really the two only things that they do? Is the advertising on the shirts and then the stuff in the field? Is there other stuff that they do? I remember back in, I think it was in the 90s, they had like little fold out ads up by the score, where they had like a little Snickers bar there for like 10 minutes or something like that.
The Americans are the only ones that I've seen do that.
Yeah.
I mean, in Spain, it might have, I get feeds sometimes when I have to, but, on the internet or whatnot.
Right.
And I don't see
Are you
that.
suggesting that you do that somewhat illegally?
Well, I type something into Google, and if it comes up, I don't ask any questions.
All right.
I want to see the game.
Sure. No, I understand that.
But yeah, I mean, I guess you could do little things like that, but that's right. It would have to be somebody in charge who would say, well, let's try it. And let's see how it goes and give it a real chance, not just, try it one time or whatever, because it goes against the model that you see with everything else. I mean, with the other sports, for example, you watch a football game, you're breaking for commercial quite often.
Yeah.
And even when
more so than I think in any other sport.
Right. And even when you're not breaking for commercial, oftentimes you're still not watching the sport unfold. You're listening to commentators talking about strategy,
right,
or talking about personal issues of the players,
right,
and kind of building the narrative about what these players are, talking about character, talking about things and values that are important to the American people, and tying it to their performance on the field. And all of that narrative, none of that exists for soccer, as far as I know. I mean, I don't watch the MLS, partly because I don't have time. I'm from Madrid. I watch the Madrid.
Sure.
I watch the, La Liga. I have nothing against the MLS. I just, that's one thing I don't really know much about.
Sure.
And
no,
so
why would you? I don't really watch it either.
Yeah. Well,
I try to catch like their championship game, but it's hard because I don't really follow, and sometimes I don't know what's on. And there's the MLS championship game, and I'll try to watch some of it. But and so I've seen a couple of those.
And you know how it is to be a fan. I mean, you grow up with a team, and it's hard to kind of pick and choose and be a cafeteria fan, at least for me. I mean, I grew up in Madrid, not far from the Bernabeu. My grandfather was with Real Madrid. My father was Real Madrid. And
now, when you say with, you mean fans of?
Fans of.
Okay,
and so
they didn't play for them.
I mean, my brother-in-law is a fan of Atlético de Madrid, right? He his family's with Atlético, the Cardelo, and a lot of these things can seem arbitrary, but they're what you grew up with when you were a kid, and it's what you put your alliance with. And so whatever happens after that, you kind of like shrug and say, well, it's just my team.
Right.
Even though I might not have chosen this at this time in this decade and this and that, it's still your team. So there's an emotional element, there's an irrational element to fandom that you can't easily create out of the nothing. It's something that comes with your own history and your own experience, and that's something that we haven't established in the United States, I don't think.
What do you mean haven't established?
Well,
in terms of soccer, or in terms of
in terms of soccer.
Yeah, okay, all right, yeah, because certainly in terms of sport, I mean, what you're describing
is exactly what happens with football.
As a Red Sox fan, as a Patriots, absolutely.
Because you're from Boston, right?
Exactly, yeah, and that's what.
But there's a phenomena here that didn't exist in Spain when I was growing up, and it's because of the mobility that people have in the United States that, strangely, in the last 10 years has kind of stopped. People don't move as much as they used to. It's something that I've been reading about. But there are a lot of fans that pick which team they want to like. It doesn't matter if they're from there or not. It's just the team they like. That kind of, I don't know.
It's a little weird to me, too. It
doesn't happen as much in Spain, although it does happen, of course.
Well, I think there's a couple phenomenon. One is if you're from an area that is either roughly equidistant. So, like, for example, if you're from where we are now in sort of this Rockford sort of corridor state line area, I mean,
we have many to choose from.
You have a couple to choose from. So, baseball, you could be a Brewers fan or a Cubs fan or a White Sox fan. Football, there's the Bears, Vikings, and Packers, and there's a considerable split among our students when I talk to them about this, and Cardinals as well in baseball. And so there's some of that where there's enough distance between you that you have sort of a choice. But even then, a lot of times when I talk to them, it's not as if the students chose. It often, well, they do in a way, but they get it from their family. They get it from either directly that, this is my dad was a Cubs fan, so I'm a Cubs fan, or and this is what I grew up with. Or
you're right.
Or
That's
everyone
true.
in my family was
That's
a Cubs fan, so I chose the White Sox. So you get some of that too.
What I might be reacting to a little bit too is when I talk about soccer with Americans, and their favorite teams are often because they just chose that team from what they've heard in the media or what their friends like, and that is definitely deracinated. It's taken away from its local roots and just become a market commodity in a way that seems weird, but that's
and that's the one of the other phenomenons there is when if you wanted to become a fan of a sport. And I think a lot of times...
I remember when you approached me 4 years ago.
Yeah,
you said, "Hey, I want to get into soccer. Who should I go for?"
Right. I was polling it around, and I looked at and I chose EPL for language reasons mostly,
and because it's you can watch it on
and
TV
it's more easily accessible here. And so I wanted to adopt a team, and because I'm the kind of fan that has to be partisan. There's this concept of a purist fan that just can sit down and watch any game, any match at any point, and I respect that, but that's not me. I mean, I can do that at times, but if I'm really going to follow the sport, I need someone to root for, and maybe even someone to root against. And so, I looked around. I chose Liverpool for a couple of different reasons.
For Fernando Torres.
Yeah, that was part of it. No, actually, it was a couple of reasons. There was also an Israeli player that played on there that he doesn't play for them anymore, and that was playing on that year. And I saw a couple, and he got a couple goals, and so I was kind of excited about that. And then, there were certain parallels between the history of Liverpool and Boston and connections there that sort of, I was like, okay, this seems like if I'm a Boston fan, Liverpool seems like the right kind of match. And then it turns out that the ownership group that owns the Red Sox ended up buying Liverpool. So it even kind of doubles down.
Wow.
The connections there.
I almost thought you had something to do with that.
Right. But, as we were talking about that, because, now ESPN has invested quite a bit in trying to promote soccer in the U.S. and trying to bring it over more. And they have a lot of games now. They don't have every game. And, and they're on, from the American perspective at weird times. I mean, I'm sure you can appreciate this. Trying to watch games in Spain, it's kind of, game is on at 8:00 in the morning or something like that.
No, they tend to be on at about 1:45
in the morning.
No.
Oh, in the afternoon. Oh, that can be quite. But I know that some of the EPL games were often they could have been at. And they were at different times. It wasn't a regular time, and so it could have been at 6 a.m. on a Saturday morning or Sunday morning. It's like, by the time I missed too many games. I didn't really get into the flow of it.
Right.
And so it was now there's a lot more now, and then there's Fox Soccer, and then there's a couple of the other cable things that you can subscribe to and get almost all the games. So I could do that. It's just a matter of
La Liga games have been sold to beIN Sport, which is owned by Al Jazeera.
Yeah.
And so you have to have that channel or you're screwed. That's pretty much the only way to get it, unless you do the Google search.
Right.
Then you can find someone that'll put it on there for you.
Right.
But luckily we get that here at Rockford College. We get the beIN Sport channel. So if I can't watch it at the times they show the Champions League games, La Liga games, at least most of the time I'm too busy to watch those games religiously. I read about them, I stay up on them, but I definitely watch the Champions League games. I watch the derbies, which are the Madrid versus Madrid, and I watch the Clásico, of course, the Madrid-Barcelona games, and all the Champions League games and any national games too.
So, clarification question, a couple. One, how long is how many matches do they play La Liga, like match sort of as part of the league?
I don't know. Maybe I'm not sure how many games.
Okay,
30 or 40.
Now, and then the derbies that you talk about, the Clásico, are those part of the league play, or are they something distinct? Okay, so they're just sort of the rivalry games as part of the league. Okay, all right. Thank you. That's one of the fascinating things about international soccer, I think, from an American perspective, is because in an American perspective, right, you have the league, you have regular season and postseason, and that's it. You don't certainly have like the Red Sox going in and playing these other games,
right?
Although they used to. I mean, when you read, like I just finished a David Halberstam book about like baseball in the 40s, and which was kind of iffy, but there were some interesting things about like they would have various sort of exhibition games in the middle of the season, which they don't do now at all, right? I mean, they have exhibition games as part of preseason, but that's it.
It is, I'm not going to say that, you just have to understand. It is complicated, all the games that they have. But one way to look at it is that La Liga, or the league games, that's it. It is its own playoffs, the whole thing. Every game counts in that way until you've lost no matter what. Then you just play for pride and honor. But
because they don't have a playoff system.
There's no playoffs. The one that has the most points at the end of the league wins La Liga.
Right.
So if that's disputed among 4 teams toward the end, then it's like a playoffs, and it's a true playoffs because it's based on how many games you've won throughout the year. It's not based on some sudden, playoffs.
Just getting hot at a certain time of year and running away with it.
It's based on your performance throughout the whole year. Yeah. I don't know if this is the time to do this, but the way that the Champions League thing goes is, the first 2 or 3 teams from each league in Europe then goes and does this tournament for the next year, which is the Champions League.
Right.
And then there's the second tier one, which is the Europa League, which is also prestigious.
Now, in those leagues,
that's a way to play internationally with club.
Now, in those leagues, there is like a semifinal and there is sort of an elimination tournament that goes on.
The Champions League?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. It's going on right now. Tomorrow is 2 semifinals are being played tomorrow.
So do they do sort of like a round robin sort of season kind of and then have that breakout? Or is it start right away from
it starts at the beginning of the season. It starts at it's concurrent. It's at the same. It's simultaneous.
Yes, yeah, I know.
Simultaneous.
But what I'm asking is do they have a series of games that the teams in the Champions League play with each other, and then you get seeded for a tournament, or is it start off you're seeded right away and you start getting eliminated right away?
You start off in groups right away.
Okay, so it's like the World Cup.
Yeah.
In that way. Okay, and so then you have to go into the next round and okay.
That's right.
All right, so it is sort of like a
and it looks like German teams are going to take the Champions League. I mean, it's almost for sure.
Okay.
Because you don't know what happened?
No. Yeah. Too many sports.
Barcelona lost 4-0 against Munich.
Okay.
I love Munich. I like Barcelona, but I love Munich.
You like Barcelona? I thought you're not allowed to like Barcelona. Is that
when it gets this close to the end and it's a Spanish team, even if it's Barcelona,
I get that.
I still root for Barcelona.
Sure.
I mean, they lost 4-0, and Madrid lost 4-1. And it's a 2-leg game when it's a semifinal, so that way they share home court advantage or home field advantage. And so,
for listeners, we're using hand gestures to indicate that.
So tomorrow is a big day. I mean, Spain or Madrid would need 3-0 in order to pass,
right?
Or 4-1 in order to move on.
Oh wow!
And 4-1 would still be penalties because that would be equal, but 3-0 would pass.
Yeah. So I love that complicated
Which seems
structure.
Impossible.
Yeah, that's a lot of fun.
It has happened before.
Sure.
It has happened.
I mean, that's one of the things that as I mentioned,
and I'm hoping it will happen because tomorrow's my birthday.
Yeah, that's right. Happy birthday!
And so,
by the time
I want for my birthday,
and by the time this airs, we'll know. So we're, do you want to make a prediction? No. But yeah, I mean, like I was saying, the complexity of that of those arrangements, I find really fascinating in soccer, and I think a lot of American fans would as well. Although I think some of them might find it just too complex. They don't want to, they don't want to deal with that. But
well, I mean, separately, it's not complex. I mean, the Champions League is just a group of teams, and you're seeded, and then you get eliminated, and then it's semifinals, and then a final. I mean, that's not complicated. What's complicated, I think, is wait, is this a league game? Is this a Champions League game? The Champions League is
the differences in importance,
or at least
in the prominence.
Europe-wide, and the Liga is just Spain, whereas
But I think where some of the issues might come in is in terms of the prominence, because with so many games and not even to mention the international commitments they might have to their national teams for that for World Cup qualifying and things like that guys, your top players might not be with the team, and so there's because they might have to play with the national team, and that seems from in American sports we don't really deal with that, right?
With competing
obligations, competing tournaments. It's I mean, to some extent you see that a little bit with when the Olympics come up. So particularly with basketball, you see that, and it's the placement of the World Baseball Classic as before the season, so it's not interfering with the regular season. But it's one of the holdups. I mean, Major League Baseball would love to have, I think, baseball as part of the Olympics, just for the international growth perspective. But they don't want to have to interfere with their games and have their best players in August going to play somewhere else.
Don't baseball players play for so long in the year. I mean, aren't they
There's 162 games.
Right.
That's just regular season. You have all the preseason games, and then then the playoff games if you make the playoffs.
Right,
so
with soccer, you're not playing this summer unless you're in the World Cup, you're in the European Cup, or you're in the America's Cup. That's the summer. Mm-hmm. So that's one way they deal with that.
So it doesn't conflict as much.
And I'm talking about Europe. I'm not
sure
talking about other places, but with Europe, that's...
Well, and I mean, soccer is internationally super popular, of course, but I think just in terms of the revenues and the population that watches it, I think Europe is significant by leaps and bounds over the rest of the world.
You think? I don't know. I mean,
I think in terms of revenue,
and Mexicans and Central Americans, they love soccer.
Oh yeah, I'm not saying that it's not popular. Even
Are you
the
talking
most
about
popular
television revenue?
Yeah, I'm talking like television revenue and the source of the players playing and people the eyeballs on the TVs and so on like that. I think I think Europe is so much bigger.
Until recently, Brazil was the team.
Yeah.
I mean, as a national team for decades, and rightly, right. I mean,
sure.
So, and now we have the next World Cup is going to be in Brazil.
I know,
and they're a strong contender to win it. I mean, they always are. The Brazilians are always strong contenders to win it. The Argentines have always been very good at soccer as well. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I don't know. I haven't looked at the numbers of revenue and all of that, but as far as popularity, I think it's just as popular.
Yeah, and it's hard to quantify. What do we mean by popular? Because, I mean, you can look at revenue. You can talk about number of people playing, number of eyeballs actually watching. You can talk about average attendance. Right? I mean, that's one of the interesting things, I think, in coming back to the sort of U.S.-based sports when we talk about NBA and MLS. As I started the radio show, I mentioned how MLS has sort of moved up by some measures into third place because I think that their average match attendance is roughly equivalent to the average game attendance for basketball, which is somewhere around 17,000, if the numbers were correct that I saw. Mm-hmm. So the big difference, because the NBA's revenue is over $4 billion, and the MLS is under $1 billion. The big difference is TV. But the actual people going to the games is closer. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's significant, because if the league can then, MLS can translate that into better TV contracts, they can grow the revenue in the sport big time.
Yeah.
And I think that's coming. I do think that's coming, and in some ways. Now, it's just speculation. I don't have a lot, but just looking around anecdotally, I just see soccer so much more as part of the sport culture in the U.S. If it's between just being on SportsCenter, talked about, it's still very little talked about on the radio.
As a parent of little kids, it's super popular with parents and kids. Yeah, it just is. I mean, it's a sport that a lot of people put their kids in.
Yeah,
it's simple. I think all you need
simple,
is a ball.
Right. It's relatively perceived at least safer than a lot of the other sports. Certainly in terms of football, I mean, you can get concussions, you can get all kinds of injuries in playing soccer and stuff. And I remember one of the reasons why I didn't like it as a kid was I hated getting kicked in the shin. But you're not going to get hit in the head with a baseball. You're not going to get knocked over and stuff. But
it's dangerous for the knees, ACL, and
any running around and twisting around like that is going to be. So that's why I said perceived. Right. And so I think it's at that age, the kids running around like that is they burn off a lot more energy than other sports.
You're running a lot. I'm kind of glad that you didn't take this in a way that I thought you would. This discussion here, because obviously I'm sure that our listeners now know for sure that I'm no expert on soccer, but I'm a fan. I like it.
Sure.
And, you didn't ask me what people at parties sometimes do is they ask about the sport itself as if there's something intrinsically less interesting in one sport over another, as if I have found from experience that conversation is kind of pointless, because you grow up liking something that your dad has liked, that your mom has liked, that your culture has enjoyed, and you've attached your emotions to it, and you've gotten excited about it.
Right.
And
it's almost an aesthetic experience. It's not logical.
It's an aesthetic experience. So, but, I often hear, or I used to, I hear it less now, but this idea that, with soccer, there isn't there aren't as many points, you know? And so I don't understand that very much, because everything is an attempt to make a goal. So
Right.
As a friend of mine has said, and he wasn't into soccer at all. I met him at UCSB at University of California, Santa Barbara. They are our neighbors. And he's a huge sports fan of all kinds, but he wasn't into soccer. But I was with him once in a bar, and I got really excited about a game. And
you get excited.
And he said, "Oh, well, so he started watching some games, and now he knows a lot more than I do. His name's Kenneth Brewer. He knows way more than I do.
And
about
is he a fan now? I mean,
he's a huge
fan.
He's a German supporter.
Okay.
But he said to me at one point, he said, once I realized that it wasn't boring, it's all action all the time.
Right.
Yeah. Because there's no stopping it unless, it's the halftime. And so...
And I'm sure you have this experience. The minute you do walk away, because let's say you have to go to the bathroom, that's when there's a goal. It happens every time I watch a game.
Yeah, my daughter tells me, "Papá, vete del cuarto para que hagan un gol. Leave the room so that they'll make a goal."
Right. Yeah, it happens all the time. Yeah, no, I love watching it. I find it very, very exciting, particularly when you're watching. A good match when you're, and I don't mean that just like, it's intriguing in itself.
Oh, there are some bad matches. Yeah,
but like when you're watching the best players play. So I mean, that's why we talked about the MLS. I don't get as engaged in an MLS game as I do when I watch the national team, or when I pick up and just watch part of an EPL game that's playing on ESPN. It's so much more interesting to see the top athletes play. It's just. From me at least, intrinsically, that
gives you that sense of awe of, wow, how do you do that?
Well, it is more action, where I think when it's the athletes aren't as good, it's not quite as
it seems like luck.
Yeah, to some degree, yeah, in some ways, and and that's with any sport. I mean, I think a lot of people say that about baseball. Oh, it's boring. I took Sam to his first baseball game. He's almost 4, and I took him to his first baseball game this weekend, Rockford College. And he was kind of interested the first inning, and he was watching everything. And after the first inning was over, are we done?
Well, but Sam, I mean, he's
the attention span.
How old is he?
He's going to be 4.
Well,
yeah, no, I know. And then, but he made it through the whole game. Although, to be honest, he spent a good chunk of the middle innings watching Curious George on my phone. But then he watched the last half, and he kept on in. I see a home run, which kind of gets to your point about. The scoring, and that is a general phenomenon. I think that the more casual fan in any sport wants to see more scores, whether it's more touchdowns or more baskets or whatever, and more goals. Where as you begin to understand the sport, that is still important, of course, and still an interesting aspect of the game. But when you start to understand the complexity of the rest of the game and the interesting things that are going on. As part of the sort of chess match of whether it's soccer or baseball.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, but I love the low score. I mean, 1-0. That's like everything to nothing, and I like that. There's something round about that. There's something heavy
there's an incredible tension that builds the whole game.
It's
if
a
there's
different
no
experience. It's suspense, it's tension, and then the release is huge.
Yeah.
When you make a goal, there's nothing else like it for me in a sports experience. I mean, maybe we should make each goal count as 6 points, like we do with football.
Yeah,
and then, but then would it be okay then?
Yeah, I think there's that perception, and it's unfortunate in a lot of ways from my perspective. I mean, I don't know if it's intrinsically unfortunate, but just as a big fan of football, there's a perception at least that they've tried to increase the offensive and given an advantage to offense, whereas I like the defensive side of the game much more. Unless my team is the one scoring, right? But and so I ultimately I want to see more balance. I don't want to see totally defensive games or totally offensive games. I want to see more balance. And
the totally defensive game is just terrible to watch, in my opinion.
For American football,
soccer,
or for soccer too.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Like if a team just hangs back and plugs up as much as they can, they keep their whole team back the whole time and just rely on counterattacks, which is a legitimate strategy, but it's painful to watch for me anyway. That's just my opinion on what kinds of games I like. I prefer a game that both teams are trying to make a goal.
Yeah.
That's
right. Yeah. Rather than sort of, maybe playing.
From a fan's perspective, just what I want to be entertained by.
Yeah.
But I understand that sometimes strategy requires different tactics.
Right. No, definitely. So we only got a couple minutes here. One question I thought maybe you might have some perspective on, kind of touching on a little bit on what we already talked about. If 10 to 20% of the best athletes in the U.S. were going into soccer, do you think that the U.S. would be one of, if not the dominant soccer power? And do Europeans think about that? Do they is that any kind of discussion that or fear that if the U.S. ever really took soccer seriously at that level, that their best athletes were going into soccer, that they would I would blow them out of the water, but be a serious contender?
Well, this is just the opinion of one man,
sure,
one person,
but with a perspective, because I mean, you know, of growing up there.
Well, no, I think viva el fútbol. Viva el fútbol. I mean, when Spain loses to a game that they deserve to lose to, like they lost to France in 2 World Cups ago, viva el fútbol. I mean, you know, you lose, you win.
Sure.
It's only when it's unfair or you feel that there's a clear injustice that then it's harder to say viva el fútbol, right?
Right.
But no, I think Europeans would be delighted if Americans got into it and let's have more football, let's have more soccer, let's have more competition, let's go, let's... Yeah, bring it on. That's how I would react to that.
That's how you would.
I speak to for everybody, but
because I wonder about that sometimes.
I don't think there'd be like a fear. You know, don't get into it because then you'll beat us. I mean, no, I don't think that would be a sporting attitude to have. You know, I mean,
right? Why? Partly because I wonder about like trying to bring the World Cup back to the U.S. Again.
I think that would help. You know, if the United States had a big, like, amazing moment that really everyone could have a touchstone on. That's it. You know, look at what we did, and then, you know, that might change things. Well, especially with the youth. You know,
and I think it's been happening slowly ever since, as I mentioned, 1994 when we had the World Cup here, and the U.S. was involved in that, and slowly, and then we had in South Africa, we won the Confederation Cup against who? Who did we win against? Do you remember
when?
The U.S. in the South African Confederation Cup,
like 5 years ago or something.
Yeah.
No, I don't know. Who?
It was Spain.
Oh, yeah?
That's why I was asking like that. Right.
You're being coy.
I was.
Was that the 3-0?
I think so.
Yeah, I watched that in the airport.
Yeah. So these moments
back from Spain.
These moments I think slowly build, and then you have the disappointment in the South African World Cup where I think, you know, we felt like we were robbed a little bit by some of the officiating. And I think with each successive World Cup and each successive success, I think it is building, and that's why I think it all is going to build towards each other. I don't see soccer being, you know, the number 3 sport overall, you know, within the next couple of years, but I do think within a decade it will be up there, at least as really one of the 4 major sports. And I don't know which would be dropping out, but it'd probably be hockey. But
well, I hope you're right. I really do, except for one selfish little thing. If that happens, then it'll be harder to find it on Google, you know, to watch.
But it might be right there on TV for you.
That would be nice.
All right. Well, thanks for joining me, Bill.
Thanks.
This has been the Sports Ethicist Show. Thanks for listening. You can check out the blog, sportsethicist.com. You can find us on Facebook and Twitter, and you can email the show at sportsethicist@gmail.com.